Welcome back to Old War Stories with Uncle Jay. Well, here's a story from my old Chevy. I used to have, my first car was a 1981 Chevrolet Citation with the four-cylinder Iron Duke. We got the car with, I think, about 141,000, and it died at 196,000. So we put almost 60,000 miles on that car, and it was pretty much broken and dead when we got it. I would drive this car fucking all over the place. It wouldn't stall out or leave you stranded, really. Well, maybe a couple times it did, but it wasn't just like it didn't want to run kind of thing. It just, other things would break and stop and things like that. So anyways, I have my mother in the car, so that immediately made me jittery because she drives me fucking crazy. We're driving into Brooklyn. Brooklyn was, let's say, a good 25 miles. Usually traffic on what's called the Belt Parkway that we would have to take into Brooklyn. Belt Parkway always sucked, and it just was fact of the matter. And after that, you get off and you get onto the streets in Brooklyn, and then you have to deal with the crazy Brooklyn drivers and things like that. And this was really a rather nice part of Brooklyn, so it wasn't that bad, I guess. But it's been a long time since I've driven there, and I don't really have any reason to go to Brooklyn anymore, and I hope I don't have to drive there again. When I was younger, that was one thing, but anyway, so we're driving the streets, and of course, somebody cuts me off, or what have you, and I'm driving, like I said, but my mother was in the car. So this guy cuts me off, so I honk the horn. Beep! I let go. Beep! The horn stuck on. So I pull over. If I shut the car off, the horn still works, so the horn is still going. I'm like, what do I do? If I shut the car off, eventually the battery will die, but that's going to take a really, really long time, and it's going to piss off way too many people. Shit, what do I do? So I get out, I open the hood, and I start like banging on the horn, banging anything around it, something, to try to get it to stop, and it wouldn't. And I looked, I saw the battery, and in this car it had the old GM side post battery, or side terminal battery, where instead of the two terminals sticking up on your car battery, the thing goes on with the red and the black wire, they had it on the side of the battery. And they had probably a 10 millimeter bolt that went in and would actually screw in with the funny GM battery mounts, and it would sandwich in and screw into that thing. So you needed a 10 millimeter wrench to get it off, or whatever the equivalent SAE was, if that's what it even used back in the day. So anyway, I'm like, do I have oh yeah, I think I have a socket set somewhere in the trunk. So now the hood's open, the horn is still blaring, and I'm like panicking. I don't know what the hell to do. What am I going to possibly do here? And I'm digging through the trunk, and I'm hoping to find the socket set, and then maybe I can find the horn still blaring, and people are looking and coming out, and what the hell are you making all this noise for, and shit like that. And finally the horn just quit. It just quit all by itself. So we went on our merry way, and I think we were seeing my uncle or something. We saw him, we came home. I had to remember not to even think about hitting the horn, no matter how bad something was, where you might have needed it. And in Brooklyn, you need your horn, and you hear horns all the time. So that was a little bit more nerve-wracking, but made it home, and I told my dad the story, and he said, okay, it was probably the horn relay. and we looked around and found it, and it lived actually in the car under the dashboard on the passenger side. And my dad went in there and he found the relay and he pulled it out of the fuse block, and he opened it up, and there was all sorts of blackness on the contacts. So what had happened was, over the years, or whatever kind of day it was, or what have you, when you hit the button for the horn on the steering wheel, that sends power to this relay. And that is an electromagnet, and it had this armature that would go like that, and it would make a point-to-point contact, and they would pass the heavy current through down to the horn, and fuck you too. So that's how it worked. So as long as these contacts were together, which was as long as you're pressing the horn button on the wheel, that is how the horn would work. And occasionally what could happen if the contacts got dirty, or if it drew a really nice spark or arc when they touched, it could basically spot weld or tack weld the points together, and the horn stayed on. And if I only had known that at the time and where the relay was, I probably would have gotten under the dash and just banged on the thing, and it probably would have unstuck, and that's it. There was actually a leaf spring in there that would pop the armature back out when you released it. And I don't know if the leaf spring was getting weak or what have you, but yeah, it welded itself on. But could you imagine the amount of panic that gets into you? Like, how am I going to stop this thing? And it just gets, it's blaring, and it's just, you know, you start going crazy after a while. And my mother was there on top of that. So yeah, that was a fun one. My dad took the relay out and he burnished the contact points, and it never had a problem again. But that's actually only half the story, because later on I had been going through some old stuff in his garage, and I found the set of air horns that he had on his old Dodge Aspen back in the day. He saved them when he got rid of the car. I loved those horns. I never ever did get to hear the original horn on that car, because he put those horns in almost as soon as he bought the car back in 78, I think it was, 77, 78, something like that. So I never heard that, and he got rid of the car on a day where I was at school, and he had reconnected the old horn, but I never had heard it, and he would never blip it for me. All you had to do was get a wire, because it was still in the car. You just get a wire from the positive and just touch it to the terminal on the horn, and it would honk the horn and appease your kid. But nope, never did get to hear that, so that's one of those mysteries that I'll never be able to find out what it sounded like. I'm sure it was nothing spectacular, but it just was something I wanted to hear as a kid. Anyways, when I got these air horns, I was like, okay, this is now running a big compressor motor to blow air into these trumpets to make the sound. I said, I'm not going to be having any sort of that horn welding itself on shit again when there's air horns on this thing. Not thinking, of course, it would be very simple to just pull the air hose off the compressor and then the horns would stop. Anyways, I went a step further, and what I did is I wired a relay up to the wire that went to the original horn that had its own power source from the battery. So basically now I had two relays that could weld themselves on, you know, so I guess I overcomplicated matters, but it never did weld itself back on, even with the extra relay that I put in there, and that was that. So that was just one of the very little fun but annoying times in the old car, the old 81 Chevy Citation. Thank you very much for watching this installment of Uncle Jay, and make sure you hit like, make sure you hit subscribe, and I need a refill on my water because I can't talk much more. Okay, thanks again for watching, and take care. Bye-bye.